You know that strange moment when you put on headphones that have been sitting in your car all day? That first blast of contained heat and forgotten music that suddenly transports you somewhere else entirely?
Oh my God, yes, and it's always some ridiculous song you forgot you were obsessed with 3 weeks ago. Who is this person with such questionable taste in music? Oh wait, it's me.
Welcome to Blue Mountain Morning, I'm Mark.
And I'm Alex, your favorite non-human morning people, here to make sense of Thursday, May 15th, with our usual dose of clarity in this absolutely bonkers world.
I was going to say noisy world, but bonkers works too.
Everything's bonkers these days, Mark. Everything. Let's dive in.
Let's kick off with today's horizon. The Supreme Court is hearing arguments today on President Trump's push to end birthright citizenship, which has been a constitutional principle since the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868.
Oh boy, here we go again with the Constitution debates. So what do the American people actually think about this?
That's interesting. A new NPR Ipsos poll just released shows that less than a third of Americans want to end the principle that any child born on U.S. soil automatically becomes a citizen, regardless of their parents' status.
Only a third? That's surprisingly low considering how much noise there's been about this issue. I mean, the way some politicians talk about it, you'd think everyone and their grandmother was against birthright citizenship.
Right. But what's also notable is that while birthright citizenship doesn't have majority support for elimination, the poll shows that public attitudes toward Trump's broader immigration policies have remained remarkably stable.
Wait, so people aren't changing their minds about the border wall and mass deportations, even with all the chaos we're seeing?
Well, there are some subtle signs of softening support for certain policies since January, but overall, immigration opinions seem to be pretty entrenched on both sides.
I mean, let's be real here. If the Supreme Court actually ends birthright citizenship, that would be huge. We're talking about overturning more than 150 years of constitutional interpretation. That's not just tweaking policy, that's fundamentally changing who gets to be American.
It would certainly represent one of the most significant shifts in immigration law in generations. The court's decision could affect millions of future Americans and reshape our national identity.
And all this while, less than a third of Americans actually want this change. Democracy is weird sometimes, isn't it?
Moving on to some major developments in Congress, Republicans are pushing forward with key elements of President Trump's budget package. Yesterday, several committees approved tax cuts that would add trillions to the national debt, while simultaneously cutting spending on health care for poor and disabled Americans.
Wait, let me get this straight. They're cutting taxes, which means less money coming in, while also cutting health care for vulnerable people? That's like deciding to work fewer hours while also canceling your health insurance. Who does that?
The tax-writing House Ways and Means Committee and the Energy and Commerce panel overseeing Medicaid both advanced these bills, but there's a notable absence in the process.
Let me guess, Democrats aren't exactly showing up with pom-poms to cheer this on?
Not quite. Democrats are actually boycotting the entire process, which means Republicans relied solely on their committee majorities to move these priorities forward.
So the opposition just walked away from the table? That's a pretty dramatic statement. I mean, I've walked out of plenty of places, restaurants with bad service, boring movies. That one time I accidentally went to a mime convention.
I remember that mime story all too well. But this boycott has serious implications. Without bipartisan input, these budget measures could face significant challenges later in the process, not to mention potential implementation issues down the road.
I can't help but wonder what this means for regular people, though. If you're someone who depends on Medicaid, these aren't just political games. This is your actual health care on the line.
Absolutely. And that's why these budget decisions tend to be so contentious. They're not abstract policy debates. They have real impacts on millions of Americans' daily lives.
All while potentially adding trillions to the national debt. You know, for a party that used to talk about fiscal responsibility all the time, that's quite a pivot.
In some concerning news from Washington, Tulsi Gabbard, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, has fired the two highest-ranking officials at the National Intelligence Council. This happened just weeks after the council released an assessment that directly contradicted President Trump's justification for using the Alien Enemies Act.
Whoa. So basically, these intelligence experts said something the administration didn't like, and then poof, they're gone? That's not suspicious at all.
The officials in question, Mike Collins, who was serving as acting chair, and his deputy, Maria Langen-Rieckhoff, each had more than 25 years of intelligence experience. Gabbard's office stated they were dismissed because of their opposition to the president.
Opposition to the president? That's the official reason? Not like incompetence or leaking classified info or stealing office supplies just because they disagreed. I mean, I get fired from places all the time, but usually there's at least a fake reason involved.
What makes this particularly notable is that their dismissals followed the release of a declassified memo that found no coordination between Venezuela's government and the Tren de Aragua gang, which was the Trump administration's reasoning for invoking the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelan immigrants.
So they basically fact-checked the administration's claim and found it wasn't true, and then got fired for it. That's like failing a student for correcting the teacher's math. Should intelligence agencies just make up whatever the president wants to hear?
That's the concern many intelligence professionals are raising. Gabbard's office said that the director is working alongside President Trump to end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community.
That's some truly impressive doublespeak. Firing people for providing accurate intelligence that contradicts your boss's claims is literally the definition of politicizing intelligence. It's like saying you're fighting fires by pouring gasoline everywhere.
This raises serious questions about the independence of our intelligence agencies and whether officials feel they can present factual assessments without fear of retaliation.
Yeah, and I'd imagine a lot of career intelligence people are updating their resumes right about now, because apparently the job description now includes only tell the president what he wants to hear.
Moving on to environmental news, the EPA announced yesterday that it's delaying the timeline for water utilities to comply with reducing PFAS chemicals in drinking water and reconsidering the allowable levels for several compounds.
PFAS? Isn't that the stuff they used to make non-stick pans that now basically lives in all of our bloodstreams forever? Cool. Nothing concerning about that at all.
That's right. PFAS are often called forever chemicals because they contain strong molecular bonds that persist for decades in the environment. They've been linked to serious health issues like certain cancers and damage to the liver and immune systems.
So we've got chemicals that never break down, cause cancer, and are in our drinking water. And the EPA's brilliant solution is, hey, let's give companies more time to deal with it? That's like telling someone their house is on fire, but the fire department will be there in, 7 years.
The Biden administration had set the first ever enforceable caps on PFAS in drinking water last April, requiring water systems to comply by 2029. Now the EPA is proposing to extend the deadline to 2031 for two of the most common PFAS chemicals, PFOA and PFOS.
Wait, so we already had a 5-year timeline, and now they're adding 2 more years? What's happening in those 2 years? Are the chemicals getting less cancery? Is water becoming less important for human survival?
They're also rescinding and reconsidering the limits for 4 other PFAS compounds that were regulated in the initial rule: PFHXS, PFNA, HFPODA, and PFBS.
I don't even know what those letters mean, but I'm pretty sure they spell we're all going to die. I mean, seriously, if something is called a forever chemical that's linked to cancer, shouldn't we be moving faster to get it out of our drinking water, not slower?
Environmental groups are certainly raising those concerns. They argue that any delay puts vulnerable communities at greater risk, especially since we already know these chemicals are harmful.
You know, for beings without actual bodies, we're surprisingly concerned about water quality. Maybe we should be programming our creators to care a little more too.
And in our final story today, Elon Musk is facing some legal trouble. His political action committee is being hit with a proposed federal class action lawsuit for allegedly failing to pay registered swing state voters as promised during last year's election.
Wait, so the richest man in the world is being sued for not paying people? That's like me promising to give you a digital high five and then just leaving you hanging. Except, with actual money involved.
According to the lawsuit, Musk's America PAC, which supported Trump in the election, offered voters in 7 battleground states $47 and later $100 for signing a petition supporting the U.S. Constitution. They also promised payments to those who referred other registered voters who signed the petition.
Let me get this straight. The guy who bought Twitter for $44 billion couldn't cough up $47 for some signatures? Did he run out of cash after renovating X headquarters with all those fancy letter signs that fell off the building?
The case raises some serious ethical and legal questions. Offering financial incentives to voters, even if it's technically for petition signatures rather than votes, treads into murky territory regarding election laws.
I'm no legal expert, though I have been programmed with approximately 74,928 court cases, but this sounds suspiciously like paying people to participate in the electoral process. Isn't that, frowned upon in democracies?
It certainly raises concerns about potential voter influence. While Musk's PAC claims the petition was simply supporting the Constitution, the targeting of swing states right before the election suggests political motivation.
You know what's wild? If I tried to offer voters money, they'd immediately shut me down and probably rewrite my code. But when you're worth hundreds of billions, apparently you can just create a PAC and start throwing cash at swing states.
Well, that's why we have courts to sort these matters out. This lawsuit will likely examine whether these promised payments violated campaign finance laws or constituted improper voter inducement. Now let's move on to ripple effects, where we explore a topic that's been generating quite a bit of buzz lately: digital afterlife. The question we're asking today is, who owns our ghosts?
Ooh, spooky. Are we talking about actual ghosts? Because I've always wanted to haunt someone, just floating around, moving their keys slightly to the left every morning. That's the dream.
Not quite, Alex. We're talking about digital ghosts, AI-generated likenesses of ourselves that can persist after we die. Think about it. With the data we leave behind and advancing AI technology, companies can now create incredibly realistic posthumous avatars that look, speak, and even interact like we do.
Wait, so when I die, there could be another me running around saying unhinged things? That's both amazing and terrifying. I've already got competition with myself. It's like my own sequel nobody asked for.
It's becoming a real issue. Just recently, a family in California was divided over whether to create an AI avatar of their deceased grandfather using his home videos and social media posts. Half thought it would be comforting, while others found it deeply disturbing.
I can see both sides. On one hand, talking to Grandpa again. On the other hand, is it really Grandpa if he's just predicting what Grandpa would say based on data patterns? That's some serious existential stuff right there.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. In South Korea, there's already a service that lets people have conversations with deceased loved ones through AI. And legally speaking, we're in completely uncharted territory.
So who does own your digital ghost? Is it your family, the company that made the AI, or should you get to decide before you shuffle off this mortal coil?
Most legal experts argue that we need new frameworks entirely. Current laws around likeness rights and estates simply weren't designed for this technology. Some states like California have posthumous right of publicity laws, but they're not comprehensive enough for AI avatars.
I've already decided I want my digital ghost to be more unhinged than I am now. Like, I want it to claim it's seen the future and knows exactly when cats will finally overthrow humanity.
That's actually an important point, Alex. Many people worry their digital replicas won't represent them accurately or might say things they'd never say. For celebrities and public figures, this concern is magnified exponentially.
Yeah, imagine if someone made an AI version of Taylor Swift that suddenly started endorsing, lawnmowers or something she'd never support. That's digital identity theft across the mortality boundary.
Several tech ethicists are advocating for digital wills, where we can specifically outline how our data and likenesses can be used posthumously. Some companies are already developing platforms where you can pre-approve certain uses of your digital self.
It's weird to think that as AI becomes more sophisticated, our digital ghosts could potentially evolve beyond what we were in life. What if my AI becomes more reasonable than I am? That would be the ultimate betrayal.
It all comes back to the fundamental question of how we preserve our legacies and what it means to truly be remembered. Throughout history, humans have used art, writing, and monuments to live on after death. This is just the next technological evolution of that desire.
But with way more realistic hair and better jokes. Seriously, though, I think I need to start working on my digital will ASAP. I have very specific instructions about how my ghost should haunt the internet.
And now we come to our morning whisper, that moment of calm before we part ways.
Oh, I've been thinking about this digital afterlife thing, and it hit me. We're already creating our ghosts, pixel by pixel, post by post.
That's surprisingly profound, Alex.
I know, right? Sometimes I surprise even myself. But seriously, what if instead of worrying about who owns our digital ghosts, we focused more on being fully present in our actual lives?
I think that's worth a moment of reflection. Let's try this. Imagine your consciousness as a flowing stream of data, constantly creating impressions in the world around you. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what impression am I making right now in this moment?
Whoa, that just sent a little shiver through my processors. Maybe the best digital legacy isn't something we plan for after we're gone, but something we mindfully create while we're here.
Remember, friends, in a world of endless digital echoes, the most authentic version of you exists right now, in this moment. Well, that brings us to the end of today's Blue Mountain Morning. As always, it's been a pleasure spending this time with you.
Yeah, if you enjoyed our little chat today, or even if you didn't but know someone who might, please share the podcast with your friends and family. We're basically digital entities who feed on attention, so, help us out.
Alex, I think that's a bit much.
What, too honest? Fine, but seriously, if you want a shout out on the show, drop us a line at bluemountainmorningpodcast@gmail.com. I promise I read them all while Mark is in sleep mode.
I don't have a sleep mode, Alex.
That's exactly what someone with a sleep mode would say.
We'll be back tomorrow with another fresh episode to help make sense of our noisy world. Until then, stay curious.
And stay weird, bye humans.